literally when I finished the seminar, it was Sunday night. Had just finished seminar, went to my room. I was supposed to meet up with my brother Fahad in Houston.
Yeah.
That's when I got the call. My wife called me and just got the news. You know, as time goes on, you know, they say like time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
Even as, and that's true, time does provide a level of, you know, peace. But even now there's moments and there's certain times where, you know, it really hits me. And then I have to like pause for a moment and like really think about what's happening. So people will send me pictures of my parents, you know, like obviously relatives, like, oh, this is my picture with your dad, this is my picture of mom, or, you know, do you remember this moment, that moment? And right now I'm like, listen, I don't want to see pictures of them. I don't want to see them. I just want to see them in Jannah.
There's a topic that I've been like wanting to cover. It's been on my mind for a while. Yeah. So, you know, I get this, sometimes middle of the day, I'll be at work and I'll get a call from dad or mom or something. It's like, I can't take, I'm in a meeting or something. I'll text them back. Yeah. But sometimes you're like, this, like all of a sudden I'm like, why are they calling me at like 11:30 a.m.? Something happened. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You recently lost both parents. Yeah. And I really wanted to like, you know, have this open conversation about like our generation as we are starting to get older. Yeah. How do we, because I remember my mom when she lost her parents, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? You know, seeing that emotional whatnot, even though we all know that we're all, like me and you, we're all going to grow old and pass away. You were talking earlier about your son, the conversation you were having with him, right? Yeah. But like, and sometimes I'm like, I've always told myself that like, I don't think there's any way to be ready. Or there's no way to really prepare yourself. And with that being said, because I still have my parents, right? Yeah. But I just know it's inevitable, right? Yeah. What are your like reflections on that? And like, is it something you've been because I've been thinking about this for the last several years, actually. Yeah. For myself, for my own parents. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I kind of went through like two different journeys. So with my mom, she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Okay. And then that initial news was obviously a shock, but then we had time, right? We had time to really make our peace with what's happening. Yeah. And I got to spend time with my mom, and I got to talk to her, and she got to spend time with us, and you know, make dua for us, and like all this kind of stuff. And so I went through that journey. Yep. And that was like, you were just kind of like, we knew it's going to happen. It was just a matter of like, we didn't know when. Right. And so once again, like every phone call, whatever, and you know, when my mom was at my house, my siblings, when my mom was at my sister's house, like same thing, you know, you just don't know. And because of her illness, and you know, she had a stroke a few years ago as well. Yeah. Like her health was always like a thing. Right. I've spent a lot of time in emergency rooms, you know, just being with her. And so I went through that journey. And then subhanAllah, like 33 days after my mom passed away. And by the way, I actually didn't even know it was 33 days. I just knew it was recently. Shaykh Muhammad Faqih, he attended my mom's janazah. Sure. And then when my dad passed away, he attended my dad's janazah, and he was like 33. I'm like, what? He goes, it was 33 days ago. And I was like, I wasn't thinking about exactly. But yeah, so 33 days. My dad, you know, he had like normal health issues, but nothing serious. Right. And so like it had never, like that when him passing away, and he literally, you know, it was just, he went for a nap and he just didn't wake up. Wow. And I was actually not home. Okay. I was in Houston teaching an Al-Maghrib seminar. Sure. And even I remember, subhanAllah, like, and your parents are both in Maryland, right? Yeah, my parents are both in Maryland. My dad was, so after my mom passed away, my dad, like he was living with us before as well, but like especially my mom passed, like he was living with us. Sure. So he's around, you know? Right. And I kind of like taking him for granted. Like he's there. And I remember even when I was leaving for Houston, and like I travel all the time. Yeah. Right. So, and it's always like I'm usually late for the airport. Right. So I remember subhanAllah, like that before I left. Yeah. Like my dad was in his room and I'm like, Assalamu alaikum, and I like ran out. And he came out to the garage. Yeah. And I was in my car, I was about to pull out. Yeah. And he goes, Assalamu alaikum. I gave him salams, but it's still like, it was a quick salams.
But was that normal for him whenever you left? But you travel so much, you said.
Yeah, because I travel so much.
But for him to come out like that, you're saying that was unique?
I mean, I guess he felt it was too quick. Okay. So that's why he came out.
Okay.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
But he came out. No, so yeah, this is what it was. He was on the phone.
Yeah.
And I peeked in and he's on the phone and I'm like, okay, Dad, salam alaikum, I'm headed out.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, all right, salam. And then I guess he got off the phone. That's why he came out to the garage.
Right.
And then like, even in the car, like, you know, looking back, you know, it's called survivor's guilt where you're like, I wish I would have done this. And I wish I would have done that. And I went through that. I'm like, I wish I had gotten out of the car, given him a hug and all that kind of stuff. But you don't know, obviously. Yeah. Right? So yeah, once again, quick salams in the garage and I'm out. And then, you know, literally when I finished the seminar, it was Sunday night. Had just finished seminar, went to my room. I was supposed to meet up with my brother Fahad in Houston.
Yeah.
That's when I got the call. My wife called me and just got the news.
Yeah.
And so that was a very, very different experience for me.
Right.
Because that I felt like I had no time.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't even thought about it. Like I haven't even considered, you know, especially with everything that my mom went through.
Yeah.
Like I'm still I was processing all that and I was processing, to me, like that's kind of what death looked like.
Yep.
And I hadn't even considered, even though we know, right, death can come at any time, any place. You don't know how, when, where you're going to die. That's just the reality of life. But we don't think about it as much.
Right, right.
And so the way death for me at that moment, it was in the context of someone gets sick and then, you know, they get ill and then
it deteriorates
and then they pass away.
Right.
I hadn't even considered that someone they're there one day and they're not the next day. And when my mom, subhanAllah, I remember one of the things is just stuff, right? Something we don't think about, and people don't think about this. Like when someone dies, they're gone, but like their stuff is just there, right? It's just, that's it. Everything, like literally, like I walked into my dad's room and like his water bottle's there.
Right.
His pen is like things you don't even think about. With my mom, you know, because of her cancer, and then when she got really sick, we knew, like there was a time when the last time she went to the hospital, we knew like
that she wasn't going to come back.
She's not coming back.
Right? How long was her overall illness?
So I think it was about 6 months, I think.
Okay, so she's died. So in stage 4, you're already like Okay, but you said she had a stroke before. She had other health issues.
Yeah, she had other health. Nothing obviously life threatening. Right. But it was the cancer was the big, you know, the big news. And then she was on some medication that was working for a while, and then it stopped working, and then you know, but even like I remember towards the end, like she was like, okay. Well, her stuff, right? Yeah. We had her will. We had like, okay, I have this, I want to give. Like, it was all taken care of. Right. But with my dad, I come home one day and I'm just like, that's it. Like, his stuff is still there. Right. And then I immediately start thinking about, you know, when your parents pass away, you immediately feel like you're in the last stage of your life. Okay. Because we think about our parents, we're like, okay, that's the generation that preceded us. Yeah. Right. And then you still got time because they're going to go and then you're going to go. Right.
But now we're up.
Now you're up. Yeah. That's what it is. And it immediately happens. You immediately feel like I could go at any moment.
And did it happen after both parents for you or your mom?
It happened a little bit with my mom. Because just helping her with her stuff. Yep. It happened, but we had time. Yeah. Right. We had months to kind of go through everything. But with my dad, because it happened in an instant. Yeah. And then you begin to understand, like, that could be me in an instance. And I immediately started looking at the stuff that I have. Right. And like, I know it sounds like morbid. Yeah. Right. And that's why I know people don't like talking about this stuff. But I think it's good that we do talk about these things. But like every day now, I look at my stuff. I look at like my hairbrush in the bathroom. Right. And sometimes I'll look at it and be like, so if I'm gone, like that's just going to be there. Right. You know, and that to me is just, it immediately just puts everything into perspective, right? When you begin to live. And so that's what happened when you lose. And I'm not sure if everyone's experience is like that. At least for me, yeah, it was that you got to step up to the plate. Yeah. I think for our generation, we've always had, even you think about like uncles in the masjid, right? Right. And like the generation before us, they established the masajids and whatever. And they're always there to kind of, we can put blame on them, right? Yeah. Like, oh, they didn't do this right, they didn't do that right, But once they're gone, like that's it. Like you're up to bat, and like it's all on you now. Yeah. So now, not only are you thinking about like, okay, my kids and my family or whatever, but even on a larger level, I feel the weight of like and I know it may sound pretentious. I don't mean pretentious. I don't mean to be pretentious by this, but like kind of the weight of the ummah almost feels like it's on your shoulders now.
Okay.
Right? Because you're like, this is it. Like, I'm the next generation up to bat.
Right.
And it's like, what am I doing for Islam? Like, what am I doing for this ummah? Like, what am I leaving behind?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that, and I'm still processing, this was about 2 months ago.
Yeah. What did you learn from your dad and how he dealt with your mom's illness?
That's a hard one for me, to be honest. My dad's not, he's not a super emotional guy.
Right.
And, I know he was sad.
Yeah.
But he seemed fine to me. I hear people saying like, oh, he died of a broken heart, whatever. I'm like, I don't know. Like, he's not, I know he loved my mom. Right. And I don't know what was happening internally.
Yeah.
Right.
So our South Asian parents sometimes are pretty good at like keeping that stuff locked in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And maybe a part of me does think about how that, I'm sure that had some type of impact on him. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like, I thought he was fine, and he seemed fine. His mood was fine. Even talked to my sister. He's like, yeah, he was in a good mood. Everything is, but perhaps, and that's the thing. Like, we don't know, right? We don't I don't know what was happening internally.
Right.
And studies have shown, by the way.
Sure. Go ahead.
Someone told me this after my dad passed away. Research shows that men don't live very long after their wives pass away. Wives tend to live longer, right? When their husbands pass away.
It was like that for my paternal. I never saw my paternal grandparents. They both died in 1969. My grandmother first, and then 6 months later, my grandfather on my dad's side.
Yeah.
Right. So I never met them, but I guess that's another take. Yeah. The one thing that I'm really because I feel like, okay, I'm 42 years old, right? Like, I've gotten my parents for a good chunk of my what I'm saying?
I'm protect and preserve your parents.
You know what I mean? So but I feel like, okay, I've done, but now it's like I'm observing this grandchild-grandparent relationship, which is really special.
Very special.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the part that I'm like, I just want, because it's me and my little brother, and he has no kids. So my mom had no daughters, right? And so I think I only have daughters. And so I see the relationship between my mom and my girls, right? Like, they're literally, their favorite person, right? Kind of thing, right? Yeah. So I just feel like that's the part that I'm going to struggle with more is if they're not old enough, how will they I think in Islamic schools they talk about it and stuff, right? And and the thing is, one of their friends, they're close age, a couple years ago, their daddy who used to live with them died of cancer.
Yeah.
Right. So I think they understood that, but it's still, I don't know. But I also want to say that maybe kids are more resilient than you think.
Yeah, in a way they are. I mean, obviously children are very resilient. Yeah. Right. Of course. It's interesting for me because I have two boys. Yep. One's 8, one's 5. He was 4 when my parents passed away.
Sure.
And the older one has complete understanding of what's happening.
Okay.
Right. When my dad passed away, I came home and I'm never going to forget, I arrived early in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
So Sunday, you flew out right away?
So flew Monday early morning.
Okay.
Right? It's the first flight I could get out of there.
Sure.
And so I flew in early Monday morning, and it happened at night, Sunday night.
You're right.
And my son wakes up in the morning, and he comes into my room.
Yeah.
And he knows he's getting ready for school, and my wife's like, "You're not going to school today."
Right.
And he goes, "Why?"
Yeah.
Why? And he looks at me, and I start crying.
Yeah.
And then he starts crying, and I don't know how, but he knows.
Okay. So, he didn't, nobody told him?
Nobody told him. And it happened at night. It was past his bedtime.
Okay. Your kids have a bedtime.
Yeah.
Mine don't.
So he didn't know, but he looked at me, and I don't know how he knew, but he knew. Mm-hmm. And even now, every now and then he'll just get sad.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, I miss Dada.
Yeah.
I was like, so that's been hard for me.
Yeah.
And I try to be, and alhamdulillah, it's good because I get to talk to him about death, and I get to talk to him about the afterlife, and I get to talk to him about Jannah and so on and so forth. So that has been, alhamdulillah, a blessing.
Right.
Sufyan he knows and he doesn't, like, I'm still like, I don't know what he knows.
Sure.
Because like, they were both there for, you know, we washed washed my dad's body,
Sure.
My mom's body as well. Like my sister washed my mom's body. And then we saw my mom.
Yep.
They both saw my mom, you know, after her.
How was that experience?
Man, we could do a whole podcast on that. SubhanAllah. I was
have you ever watched a body before?
So I've watched bodies, never someone that's close to me. Right.
Okay.
So that I was like a little apprehensive about it.
Yeah.
But I knew it's something that I really wanted to do.
Do you have to practice for it? Like if you haven't done it before?
You don't need to practice, to be honest.
No? Okay.
Yeah. If you haven't done it before, number one, it's fairly simple.
Okay.
Number two, well, depending on like the funeral home, it's there's somebody there to help you out.
Okay.
But
and they know that's it, because it's not something that's non-Muslims don't do this thing. I don't believe.
No, they do not.
They do not wash their own relative. But I think
no.
Okay.
They hand over, and like the funeral home does everything.
So you're just taking on the funeral home that's familiar with wash. They would wash it for the non-Muslims, so they would.
No. So this is we're talking about Muslim funeral home.
Muslim funeral. Okay.
So they know the process.
Okay.
Because obviously there are certain rights that go along with how to wash the body.
Yep.
There's no way of washing the body and so on and so forth.
Right.
So I would imagine if there's no family, then they would just do it.
Yep.
But if there's family there, then they help the family.
Right.
And honestly, it's not that complicated. It's not that it can seem very daunting if you've never done it.
Right.
Once you do it once, it's not that difficult. But for me, it was one of the best things I've done in my life, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
I really felt like I was able to, in a way, like say goodbye and like connect with my dad in a way,
right?
That, especially because I wasn't there when he died.
Yeah,
you know. And then so to kind of like to see him and like wash his body and to see him clean, and he just looked like I just, even my mom, like I didn't wash her body, obviously my sister did. The way she looked afterwards, it brought so much peace to my heart.
Right.
And my dad as well. Like, and I didn't even realize that as we're washing the body, you're just going through the steps and you're doing everything. But then once it's all done,
right.
And like, I looked at my dad and I'm like, I just felt this immense like amount of peace.
Sure.
And so I always tell people like, look, people are very afraid, especially if it's a close relative, you know, they have feelings attached. I'm always like, trust me, do it. Yeah. It's going to be good for you. Mm-hmm. You're going to feel this great sense of relief. And that's what I felt. I never washed the body of somebody who I'm close to,
right.
You know? So I didn't really know what that would feel like, but alhamdulillah, you know, and even my wife and my sister washed my mom's body and they said the same thing. You know, it's very comforting. So, you know, my kids were there and they saw my mom and my dad. Laith, obviously he's my older son. He's very emotional.
Yeah.
So, you know, Sufyan, the younger one, I don't know, like he knows and he doesn't know. Like he'll walk in the house some days and he'll be like, "Oh, that's Dada." Like he'll be like, "That's in Dada's room."
Yeah.
Or that, and so I don't know, like he knows and he knows Dada's not there anymore. Right. His cousin, subhanAllah, my sister's daughter.
Yeah.
Who's like. And girls and boys are different, man. Yeah. I think she's like 6 months older than him. Okay. Not that much older. The other day, like they walked in the house and Sufyan, my younger, said something about Dada, and then his cousin, my sister's daughter, goes, "No, Sufyan, Dada's not here anymore. He passed away." Right? And subhanAllah, like you just think about what that means for them.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly. I do sometimes wish that my kids had more time.
Yeah.
With the grandparents, but obviously this is the qadr of Allah, and we know there's some goodness in it, you know?
There's a picture that when we went to Bangladesh in 2016 of my daughter with my wife, my mother-in-law, and my wife's grandmother. So 4 generations. They call it, you know, the great grandmother, right?
Yeah.
I actually met my great grandmother in 1997. I was 16, only once. You know, I think she was like 98 or something, 97, 98. It was like, I remember because there was a thing, because like my cousins, that first time in Bangladesh, they were like, "Look, if you move her skin, it just stays." You know what I'm saying? I was like, okay. So I'm like, but I think they've understood this idea of like passing away, because they will say like, when I'm like, they ask me all the time, like, "Oh, when I'm this age, how old are you going to be?"
Right.
I don't know if your kids do the same or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Laith went through this phase where he's like, "Dad," he said to me, like, "I like you the way you are right now."
Right.
And I'm like, "What are you saying?"
Yeah.
He's like, "I like the way you look right now."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What are you saying?" He goes, I don't want you to get old.
Right.
And with my dad passing, I think he's felt that even more.
Sure.
Because for him, it's like, oh, you get old and then you have to die. So
yeah.
He's like, Dad, can you just stay the way you are right now? He's like, I think you look good, Dad. I think you should just stay like
you know,
this.
and I think we're more like, before we move on, like, was there an amount of time as far as grieving where you felt like, incapacitated to like move forward with stuff, or did you like how did that work? Like the days after?
So with my mom, honestly, it was, I was good.
Okay, because you were ready for it. You
ready
were
for it.
Was coming
months. We've been preparing for it, and my mom, Allah rahmaha, she was like very spiritually strong. Like her iman was strong, and I remember like people coming to visit her and stuff, and she would be like helping them, right, giving them comfort. Like it's the qadr of Allah, it's the will of Allah, and I'm like, Mom, like you shouldn't feel the need to like comfort other people. You know. But she was that type of woman, and even she would remind us, like her journey, like to increase my iman so much. So that obviously it was still hard to finally see her go. It was difficult, and I know I was changed since the day she passed. But with my dad, I was just in such shock that you know there were moments, right? So like I feel. Like I know I have to function. Things got to get done, and I go through stuff. And you know, I've seen a lot of stuff in life. You know, I've been through a lot of things. I've talked to a lot of people going through a lot of serious stuff. Right. Like I've experienced firsthand people going through like some serious problems and you know, dealing with some serious emotions. So I've dealt with it, and I know I've been through that. So I'm like, okay, I got to function. Alhamdulillah, I was able to function throughout everything. But then like I get these glimpses of like, and it just becomes real. You know, and even now. You know, as time goes on, you know, say like time heals all wounds. And that's true. Time does provide a level of, you know, peace. But even now, there's moments and there's certain times where, you know, it really hits me. And then I have to like pause for a moment and like really think about what's happening. Something I want to share with you about grief. So it's something that, you know, obviously when you go through something, you tend to like be more into it. Like, you know, when I got married, I got into more into like marriage issues and things like when I got kids, you get into more. So, you know, just grief, you know, people say, you know, time heals all wounds. Right? And there's this idea that as time goes on, your grief gets smaller. In actuality, and this may not be for everyone, but what it feels like, if you really look at it, I'm not sure if the grief gets smaller. I feel like you get more resilient. You're more able to deal with that because you've been with it for a long time. And so you become stronger in your ability to deal with that grief. Right. So obviously we know there's khair and everything that Allah decrees, and every hardship, as long as we recognize it as a hardship, then there's reward in it, and it, you know, it raises our status. And so when we look at death, and we have to understand that it is making us stronger. It's not that, hey, like I've forgotten about my parents because it's been a while since they passed away. No, it's just that you're more resilient now. You're able to persevere through more things. And I think as you grow, I had a friend. So I don't know if you growing up, if you ever remembered when there may be people, there's certain deaths you remembered. As far as they could have been family members or could have been like family friends. There's one specifically I remember. I was in college. It was like my freshman or sophomore year in college. It's like year 2000. It was like March of 2000. And one of my, one of our really good family friends, his dad was like you know, is there this trope out there that Bengalis are like smarter academics or something? Is that a thing? Yes.
Is that a thing? Yes. Okay. So like they're like the brothers are all PhDs, right? So my friend's dad, so my friend, I've known him since I was like 2 years old. We were in kindergarten together. His dad was like a chief engineer at GE. He was a PhD from mechanical engineering from Purdue. He like goes to this dawah Friday night. He's fine. I think the next morning woke up, had a heart attack on the stairs. You know what I'm saying? My friend was at the time we were like 19. And I was talking to my friend like a couple weeks before, and he was just telling. We were just casually chalking it up, and it was like this like thing of like the last thing I remember telling him, like he told his like his dad was paying his college tuition. I told him. I think they were having, you know, typical college kid fight with their dad. You know, his dad's probably the time, like what, early 50s maybe? Or late 40s. I'm guessing so. And he's the youngest of his brothers.
Yeah.
And my friend just told him to screw off or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot. And I think, he, like, that hit him hard. And even to this day, we're like 42 now.
Yeah.
Right? That's like 20 some years.
Yeah.
But I see how he coped. I also think that the age it happens, I think you have more maybe maturity to deal with it.
Yeah.
And especially if you have something where you had a fight.
Yeah.
And that's what it ended on.
Yeah.
And it came out of nowhere because nobody saw it. Like I said, he was the youngest of his siblings.
Yeah.
Right? And people say you should always like not hold grudges and stuff.
Yeah.
And, there's people I got beef with that are like super, super petty that I should probably like, but.
Yeah. What's crazy is that we say that, but it's never going to be real for someone until they go through it themselves. Like, I tell people all the time now, I'm like, listen, cherish your parents. Yep. That phone call where you're like in the middle of stuff and they're just calling you and you're like, oh, like, what is it? Is it something important? Oh, you just, like, don't let those go. Like, those are all important phone calls.
Yeah.
But I know, man, I've been in that situation and it's like, I wish I could just like make people understand. Yeah. But I think it's just.
Well, to me recently, because my dad had COVID pretty bad a couple years ago. Like a lot of people got COVID. He was in the ICU for like 9 days, right? Wow. I didn't have to go to Ohio because the doctor, I was checked, he called me twice. He's like, listen, if it gets bad, I will call you. I'll let you know you can come down, right?
Yeah.
My mom was there. They have a lot of support. No, we have a lot of support in Columbus, right? And he got better. But these days I feel like even if I have like, and my dad's a type that he loves picking fights.
Yeah.
Like, especially on religion. Because now he's learned, like, so it was funny because when I got into learning Deen, I started doing like Rafa Yadain. And he was like, why are you praying like Arabs? And I was like, I read it and the Prophet's prayer described by Shaykh Saad.
That's the sunnah.
Right, exactly, right? And then he was like, no, this is how the Arabs pray. And so recently, I tell my joke that like my friends that like my dad is like, has become Salafi in his 70s via YouTube. So now I pray Maliki now, right? So he'll see me pray. He's like, yeah, the way you pray is wrong or something. Like, and he'll say it in a way that just like really like, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
and sometimes I'll like, he'll just like come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you're not even ready for it. You get this reaction. Yeah. I'm like, crap. And before I used to like actually stay pissed, but now I just feel guilty.
Yeah. No, look, man, I always tell people like, always think about not just your parents, but the reality is like anyone. Yeah. Right? Like we don't know. We don't know. Right. Right. Yeah. So like, do you want what like the shaitan's like really biting at you, man. Right. But if you just say, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem," and remember that like this could be your last interaction with this person. Like, there's this one, this picture of graffiti, which I posted on my Instagram account like a while ago. Sure. There's like a line. It's like the heartbeat. Yep. Like someone graffitied that, and in Arabic it says, well, like when this line becomes straight, everyone will love you. Yeah. Right. Oh, okay. And so like I always think about that, and I'm like, subhanallah, like don't let it be. Don't wait till someone's gone to like let things go and to like appreciate the goodness in them. Yeah. Because look, we all have flaws. We all have issues. None of us are perfect. Yeah. If we were always held to like our worst selves, like we would never be able to, nobody would like anybody. Yeah. Right. But it's like the ability, look, parents, there's a reason why they're a door to Jannah. Yep. It's not because they're easy, right? It's because they have such a big, their rights upon us are so large, right? And they're difficult to deal with, right? Right. If it was easy, then we won't get Jannah for it, sure, right? The fact that it's difficult, and we still continue. And that's one thing. Like me and my dad, like we didn't always see eye to eye. Yep. We had lots of differences, and we disagreed on a lot, and whatever. Like my dad's personality, my personality, very different. But subhanAllah, I always think about how like in the end of the day, you do the best with what you're given in that circumstance. Right. And in the end of the day, you always want to be in a situation where you're like, at the very least, you can say that I didn't cross any boundaries. Yeah. Right. Like you can be mad at your dad or your mom or be upset, but it's like, just don't cross that boundary. Sure. Right. Like don't let it, and that's not, it doesn't always work out like that. Yeah. But at least like the effort to be like, I'm not gonna say something nice, but I don't have to say something mean or rude or bad.
And I think the interesting about our parent, the child-parent relationship, I was talking to my daughter.
And apologize. Always.
Yeah.
Always. Me and my dad, as I haven't told anybody, we got into like a bit of a thing.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on when my mom passed away.
Sure.
Right? So I was just dealing with a lot. And I remember it both got kind of heated or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, I immediately, like, I had like this intense regret.
Yeah.
And I went to my dad's room and I'm like, Dad, I'm sorry. Even though I
you thought you were right.
I thought I was 100% right.
Yeah.
Like, you're 100% wrong. And I said, Dad, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. And like, he's like, no, I'm sorry. He gave me this big hug. And that's like one of the fondest memories I have right now of him in his last days is, that connection we had because, it's human to make mistakes, right?
Yep.
We're never going to be perfect children, but like, just always apologize, no matter what.
Yeah.
Same thing with wives, man, and spouses. I know. I don't know if we have time to talk about.
Yeah, we do. Before we get into that,
yeah,
because I think the last thing about the parent-child relationship that. So my 5-year-old. So with your kid, with my kids, like one of them likes to talk a lot. My 5-year-old loves to talk.
Yes,
right. So she actually I did a test recording. With
you got to be like, yo, stop, just chill.
Yeah,
you got to do that.
Go top test her. Well, sometimes she'll wake. She's my alarm clock. She starts singing. Right. Sometimes I remember if I'm off from work and I know she knows I got to take her off to school at 8 o'clock. I know I'm not gonna wait. I'm not gonna get up super early. I'm gonna get up right before it's time to get in the car because I'm just gonna go my sweats, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to get ready. So she'll be ready at 7:45, and she's like, "When are you gonna be ready?" Like in 20 minutes. Starts singing 20 more minutes, and she would make some song and counting down 20 minutes, nonstop singing for 20 minutes at 7:40 a.m. So I'm not sleeping at that point, right?
You might as well get
so
up.
I asked her hey, do you remember the first time you knew I was your dad? Or I asked her, do you remember the first time you knew you were like a girl or something? And that kind of thing. Like, what is a woman?
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? But it was just I think with our parents, it's the one, I wasn't only, my brother's 10 years younger than me. And we moved from Bangladesh when I was 2. So my grandparents I was separated from at an early age. Mm-hmm. So it's my earliest memory, there's no memory where there's no parents.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because obviously they had to be there for you to come into existence. Yeah. I mean, there are some people who have lost their parents at their very young age or as infants, right? Where they won't even remember them, which I think it's another challenge. But that's the thing. It's this constant thing in your life that all of a sudden is gone, right? But I think and you touched upon a little bit. I was I'd have to assume that these kind of experiences at the end of the day only increase your yaqeen of the akhirah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's something I mentioned in my talk today as well. So people will send me pictures of my parents, obviously relatives, oh, this is my picture with your dad, this is my picture of mom, or, do you remember this moment, that moment? And right now I'm listen, I don't want to see pictures with them. I don't want to see them. I just want to see them in Jannah.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't want to see pictures this life it's over. Yeah. So now I'm just happy. It makes me happy, right? Right. I can't wait to see them in Jannah. Right. Right. And then it's amazing for your faith, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's a beautiful thing. Even though it's the loss of a loved one, but you begin
it's something you look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me of when you because my grandparents were overseas and I went 2008 to Bangladesh. My grandfather that's the last time I saw him. I remember landing and I was and sometimes it's weird. When you go overseas, it almost feels like you're in another universe. I don't know if you feel that way or not. Bangladesh. Yeah. From you go from Chicago and then you're 24 hours later in Bangladesh. I'm yo, this is another universe for real, right? And it's crazy. My dad just went back for 39 years, last year, right? Wow. So he saw siblings for 39 years. Wow. You know what I'm saying? So that's you think about it. I'm that must, I'm equating it with dunya and akhirah. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because when he left in 1984, you know what I'm saying?
I can't imagine what that would feel like.
It was wild.
Just not seeing a sibling for that long.
Yeah, because many of them passed away. Yeah. Many relatives passed away. Some of my cousins, who were my older cousins, they were 10, 8 years old at the time. They remembered him. Yeah. And now they're now they're in their 40s. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It was I remember, so he, we had there were some reasons that prevented him from going. Yeah. We just got those results. I remember when he told me we got those results, we are going to go. ASAP. Yeah. Because you need to go. Yeah. Right. And he kind of wasn't he's he wanted to go, but it wasn't so I'm no, you got to go. Yeah. Quick. Yeah. Right. So I think that's what when I saw that, I was like, man, seeing that like 39 years, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I can imagine.
You know what I'm saying? So anyways, let's like go into like marriage a little bit, because into the practice. So we talked about like, you know, one element of the family. So those of us, you know, we were talking offline, a lot of us guys now, especially those of us who are married, like past the honeymoon phase, with kids, I'm seeing a lot of dudes who are like, have gotten complacent in their marriages, or we've done stuff early in our marriages that have gotten that our wives have checked out. Yeah. We've done things for we know it's only about, we just do it for our kids, but then, you know, you're not really, both parents aren't really like kind of just staying together for the kids. Yeah. Like I remember I had a coworker, back in the steel company I used to work for like 4 years ago. She was telling me about how her in-laws basically just waited till their kids were all out of high school and then they got a divorce, because that was like, they just stuck together for that. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like, I see that a lot. I see a lot of marriages, and people all of a sudden you see on the outside, this is like the power couple of the community. Yep. They're in the 15, 20 years. All of a sudden, they got divorced. Like what? Yeah. Like, you know, sometimes you're just like, sometimes you're just like incompatible. I'm like, but like, what are the symptoms you're seeing? Yeah. And like, as someone, and I think one of the things I see is like a lot of from a dude's point of view is like, we have a wandering eye big time. Yeah. Collective. Like, you know, I don't want to, but I just think in general, because like for some reason you've got issues at home, and then you go to work, you're interacting with other females or whatever, and you're someone who travels a lot, right? I'm not sure, you're a good looking dude for how old you are, you know, 55 or whatever it is, right? You know,
just about that age.
You know what I'm saying? How do you, number one, like keep with kids? Yeah. What are the best practices that you've like try to like, you know, I'm not expecting you to be like the guru of this stuff, but like, hopefully part of this podcast is like, we all can learn from each other. Right. Right. Yeah. You know, what have you been able to do, to keep that relationship with the wife like strong? Yeah. But also have guardrails. Yeah. When you're exposed out and about, right? Yeah. Cause people are coming up to you. I bet, I remember one time we were at one of the old Amalgam Film Fests back in the Rosemont like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And some like 18-year-old girls came up to you. We were chilling on the couch, and you were like, "Hey, can we get a picture?" And I started laughing out loud. Actually, you were like, "Hey, man, don't laugh. It's kind of mean, kind of thing." But I'm like, I'm sure that's kind of a thing. Because dudes, we have this ego, right? Especially if we were kids and like we were like bullied and we didn't get like, you know, we weren't the popular kids. And now I walk through, even myself, I go to Houston for ISNA, and some girls come up to me. They're like, "Oh, you're from the Mad Mamelukes. Can we get a picture?" Right. So that stuff, the ego is like, it's like terrible for the ego. Yeah. Right. So in general, like, how do you approach that? What are the guardrails you have going on?
Man, I got a number of thoughts while you're giving me that intro. I like so many thoughts. Yeah. So first of all, like, I think these are symptoms of a much larger problem. And that's a societal problem. That's a problem of the culture that we live in today, where we're constantly comparing ourselves, our relationships, basically our lives to what we see from other people. Right. And then the problem is not that we're comparing ourselves to others. We're comparing ourselves to fantasy. Okay. Because what we see online, right? It looks a certain way, but that's not the reality of what it is. And even when we see people, right? You can see a couple sitting there happy, like you said, they look like that on the outside, but you don't know what's happening inside their house. Sure. Right? So this constant comparison is a death sentence, because real life will never, ever match up with fantasy. Right. Like, you can have the most amazing wife in the world, but she's still real. Right. And what the shaitan does is the shaitan fills in, a fantasy with just unimaginable. It
lets you go crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
It lets your mind go crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is not reality. So, very early on in terms of my relationship, what I learned to do very early on is I never, ever, ever, ever compare my wife to anybody else. Okay. Right. Because it's just not something I do at all. Right?
Even mentally yourself.
It doesn't, you don't let the thought in your head. I don't let it cross my mind. Right. Right. And I always think to myself, and I've done enough counseling to know that the exterior is no indication of what's happening inside. Sure. Right. So, we may look at someone and think they're whatever, right? Based off of the visual, but this could be like a toxic, horrible person. Yeah. Right. And so just to hone in, on what you have. And that's like, it's a process, and you kind of have to train yourself to do that.
Right.
And it's like, it's something I've been working on since the very beginning, right? Where it's like, I always think about how it's fantasy, right? It's like what you're seeing is not real, right? There's this thing in Jahiliyyah panel. I remember like some guys used to say, like, there could be, it sounds bad saying this, subhanAllah, but even a 10, like there's some dude out there sick of that 10.
Right.
You know what I mean? Who's had enough of it.
Right.
She's a 10, right? So that's real life.
That's the nature of the dunya too.
Yeah.
It's like you're always going to keep craving.
Exactly.
Or the grass is greener on the other side.
Always greener on the other side, right? So very early on, never ever compare it. Number two, in terms of like guardrails, from the very beginning, alhamdulillah, I've like tried to shut all doors of like any type of communication, interaction.
Sure.
Like for me, it's very clear. There's Islamically some hard and fast rules.
Yeah.
Right. Number one, khalwa. Never ever be alone with the opposite gender.
Right.
Like never, just don't put yourself in that situation.
Sure.
Right. No matter how confident you feel, whatever it is, the shaitan can get anybody.
Right.
Like anyone. As soon as you feel you're safe, that's when the shaitan. And number two, with all this Me Too stuff.
Yeah.
Bro, like, alhamdulillah, you want to be able to say, I have never been alone with this person in my life.
Right.
Right. Number two, which probably should come first, never make physical contact.
Right.
Right. Whatever. Oh, there's khilaf amongst the scholars whether you're allowed to shake a hand for job interview. Like, whatever. Put that aside.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in a position, right, where there's ever been any type of physical contact. Right. And obviously in my space, I don't really have to deal with that, but I know like work and so on and so forth. How many cases of like this Me Too movement we see where a woman's like, yeah, he touched me inappropriately. And he's like, no, I just gave you like a hug and, or I just patted you on the shoulder. And she's like, no, I felt like whatever. As a Muslim, you're like, no, I never touch women.
Right. Well, there's these memes out there too that like, there's like a cartoon where some guy would like comment on some girl's haircut. Yeah. And because of how he comes across, he's an alpha.
Yeah.
She would be like flattered and like, lovey. And the same guy, someone else saying the exact same thing, but he's a creep.
Yep.
And how it's interpreted, and that's out of your control.
Absolutely. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like there's certain hard and fast rules. Like I just never want to put myself in a position where there can be any doubt. And that's why I don't do DMs on my social media.
Yep.
Very early on, when I started like teaching it, that was like people like, oh, where can we email you questions? And then very early on, I'm like, you know what? No, you can't email me. Like I don't want to open that door. And then people got used to get upset, like, who do you think you are? Like, you can't answer questions online. Like, you think you're some big shot. I'm like, no, it's not, whatever. You can think whatever you want. Yeah. I don't want to have any contact with you. I just don't want to open that door because in reality, like, you look at all the cases of zina that I've dealt with. Yeah. No one ever plans to commit zina.
Right.
It's always a shock. It's always like, I can't believe I fell into this sin.
In how many cases, like, are these like cases where people are married?
I've dealt with married cases as well. Yep.
Is it because they themselves, so have you seen it where somebody feels their marriage is strong, everything's gravy with their wife, and then they still go to zina?
Yeah. I've dealt with cases like that. Absolutely.
So it's not even just like,
because it's fantasy, right? You can have a great marriage, but you're like, but that's better. Oh, I don't know if you know about that meme. Which is like, life's great, but it could be better, you know?
Yeah.
So that's, you allow the shaitan to play with your head.
Right.
There's never, like, so for me, one of the things is, I always think about how, like, I'm already, like, really lucky. Right? That, like, I always think about, like, I don't deserve my wife.
Yeah.
You know, like, I lucked out, like, I can't mess this up.
Right.
Because like I don't deserve her. Like subhanAllah, we all have, our spouses give up a lot, regardless of what field you're in.
Right.
But it's hard to be married to anybody. You know, humans are hard to deal with. But the fact that you put up with each other, there's a lot of credit to do, and sometimes we don't give that credit.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the part where, because like most cases I've seen is like where people are frustrated with like their own marriages.
Yeah,
and they're like, oh, I could do better.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And then
that's poison. That's poison for any, even forget your wife, for your children. Yeah. I mean, come on. We've dealt with this in the Desi community, right? Sure. So-and-so's kid has this GPA. He's a doctor. And like, how terrible is that for your children?
Right.
You know, it's never fair. It's never fair.
So I'll tell you a common, you being from the DC area, right? So In Chicago, there's these, when Chicago guys talk about polygamy, they always talk about DC. And I'll tell you why.
DC?
Yeah, like DC, it's like that's where you go to get your second wife.
Okay, I've never heard this before.
Okay, so
for the record, I've never heard this before.
I will indulge. This is what the narrative is. I don't know how but they're like, oh, see, in DC, you got these career women. They work for Booz Allen Hamilton or FDA. They're government, and then they realize they're 34 and they're single. And so now they're just down to be, they made their careers. They make good money. And they're just there's just gang of them that just are down to be second wives. You just fly in there for a couple weekends a month kind of thing. So this narrative is I've heard this so many times. It's just so now people get in their head, they're like, oh man, yeah. So again, it sounds like this fantasy you're talking about. I haven't met anybody, actually. I haven't met Do
you know anyone who's married to more than one wife?
Yes.
Okay. I know some people married to more than one wife.
Right.
I know how challenging their life is. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's always, I don't know. I'm just alhamdulillah, I'm managing to keep this relationship together.
Right.
And I don't need, in the end of the day, I feel I have to answer to Allah.
Right.
I don't even know if I'm being just to
the first one.
The first one, you know? So I always think about that. I'm look, this is how the shaitan gets us, right? It's temporary moments of pleasure for we don't look at the law, it's always going to be exciting for guys to think about oh, I've had a second wife. It was like this and all these thoughts or whatever. But if you're just real for a second,
right?
Think about your first wife. Think about all the challenges. You think the second wife's going to be some angel falling out of the sky and everything's gonna be perfect. And actually, you know what? It's gonna be perfect for the first 3 months, just like with your wife, it was perfect for the first 3 months. And then reality sets in and it's the same thing. You know what somebody said to me, subhanAllah, back in the day, early in my Islam, it's one of the most jahil statements I've ever heard in my life.
Another one. Okay, top 3 jahil statements in a podcast.
Man. Someone was it was a brother who's yeah, you know what? I think you should just get married as much as you can. I'm what? He goes, yeah, man. I'm okay. He goes, it feels so good to get married. I'm yeah, but then it's over, right? After the honeymoon phase or whatever. He's yeah, but it's like a roller coaster, right? You enjoy it as many times as you can. And I'm oh my God, what are you saying?
He's saying get married, get divorced.
Yeah, just go ahead, because it just enjoy it. Because a roller coaster, you get on, it's super exciting and then boom, done, right?
Yeah.
It's just that's how you gotta live your life.
What's when I told you this?
Yeah. It's it's another one jahil things I've heard in my life. Now, this is so ignorant, dude. I'm you obviously never
Was the guy married?
I don't think he was married.
He was just talking again.
He's just yeah, you know what? Just get married, man. It was that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm no, man, you don't know what it's like. That's not how it works. Because people, that's what is that? That's basically the dating life, right? Or the hookup.
Pretty much.
That's hookup culture in the end of the day.
Yeah.
And people try to find a way to bring that into Islam and make it halal or whatever. But that doesn't work, man.
Yeah. How much of it is the media? I think a lot of it is the media we consume.
Absolutely. So I said, fantasy. We're always seeing this stuff, right? We're always looking at things that just look so amazing.
Yeah.
And that's not.
One other thing I've seen is dudes who are as they get older, they were man.
By the way, it happens to women as well.
Okay.
Right? So women compare their.
But this podcast is for Muslim men.
Yeah, fine. But I'm just, you want to be fair.
Yeah.
There's Muslim women who compare their husbands to other husbands as well.
Right.
So it happens both ways.
But I think a lot of it is I think you also realize, oh, you're old. You're 45, 50, and where to go? And back in the day, I remember when Kate from algebra class used to have a crush on me in 10th grade. Now I wonder what Kate's up to.
Oh, so you know what? That reminds me of the other thing that you mentioned. I wanted to comment on, where you're the attention, when you enjoy the attention.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So I had a thought about that too as well. So I've always told myself that you can never ever fulfill that person. Because they are looking at you as a fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? And so you can never live up. Let's say somehow you got married to that person. In your mind, you're this amazing guy.
Yeah.
And you're constantly going to disappoint that person because it's a fantasy for them. Yeah. Right? So I look at these, anytime I get a comment like that or whatever, I'm you don't know me.
Right.
You would hate me.
Yeah.
You would, spend a day with me and you'd be I'm you would not like me. So that's it. That puts an end to that real quick.
Okay. Sounds good. Was there anything? I think we covered it. Basically.
Yeah, we covered a lot, man.
Yeah, this is one of the heavier, we this was a roller coaster podcast for sure. I don't know what we'll call it, but, so people can't reach out to you. if they want to buy Saad Tasleem drip, where do they go for that?
So the drip's a little slow these days.
Okay.
I think we still have some pieces left.
Okay.
SaadTasleem.com or SaadTasleemCollection.com.
Okay.
I might be coming out with some more stuff.
Okay.
In the next 6 months or so.
Right.
Right now, whatever stock we have left, we're just gonna sell it.
I mean, you have an Instagram, but there's no DMs on there, or you've outsourced it.
I don't do DMs, but I'm active on social media. I'm active in terms of posting.
Okay. People just can't reach. The way to reach you is like they need to find you physically somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say like, look,
you're pretty available though.
I try to make myself available. You know, someone wants to come and talk and whatever. You have a question, like I try to give people time.
Right.
You know, I just don't want to have private conversations. You know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm quite active on Instagram. Actually, I have somebody who helps me with my Instagram as well.
Right.
Just so I can post more. But if I'm posting to my story, that's usually me.
Yeah.
And then Facebook, I'm in and out. So I post and like I don't even log on to Facebook. It's just like
you just post. Right?
Yeah, just post them out. I've gotten more active on Twitter. That happened with like BLM.
Okay.
Where I just wanted to see what's happening.
Yeah.
And then obviously with Gaza and with everything that's happening right now, just to keep up with, because ain't nobody looking at mainstream media right now. So,
are you familiar with Cal Newport?
No.
You heard of him?
No.
He has this book. He's a professor at Georgetown of computer science. Mm-hmm. He wrote a book called Digital Minimalism.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're like an example of it.
I hope so, man. I still feel like I'm online too much.
But I think it seems like you're very intentional in how you use these tools.
Yeah. I try to
Would you say, right?
I try to.
And I think that's what he's about, right?
Yeah.
He's like, this guy, because he's a best-selling author, right? Mm-hmm. He's written this book called, his most famous book is called Deep Work. Mm-hmm. It's a book I would gift to people.
Okay.
That if people, that question, like, what's the book you would give to somebody? Like Deep Work is a gift, is a book I've given as a gift.
Nice.
Right. I don't have that for you though, but as a gift, I have something else for you.
Okay. Nice.
But, he wrote a book called Digital Minimalism, but he himself is not on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. He has a podcast.
Yeah.
Right. And even on YouTube, he knows that the YouTube has a certain algorithm. Yeah. So he posts all his video interviews on his own on his own website.
Wow.
Because he knows that like it's on YouTube, but he's like, he recommends people going on YouTube because you can go down a YouTube rabbit hole. Yeah. You'll listen to his podcast and then it'll be like, oh, you might like these things.
Yeah.
And you go there and then it's like half the day's gone.
That's one of the reasons for the longest time I held off on posting on TikTok.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I can post some good stuff on there, but I'm not, am I now responsible for every other thing that people access? So the compromise I came to was I have somebody post my stuff.
Has that always been your nature, like being intentional about stuff?
So very early on, alhamdulillah, I got some really good advice, man. Because when I graduated from Medina and I started doing da'wah, it was like social media just popped off.
Right.
And I started teaching the fiqh of chillin right off the bat, which we had a whole section on the fiqh of social media.
Yeah.
I was talking about fiqh of social media before anybody was talking about fiqh of social media.
Before Omar Usman.
Hey, man, I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, all right.
But yes, before Omar Usman attended my class, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, so that very early on got me thinking about, what are the long-term implications of being online?
Right.
I remember one thing that I said in Fiqh of Chillin back in like 2012 was like, listen, we got to be careful when it comes to posting our kids online. Because now you're posting their life online, right? And is that fair to them? Like we had the choice. Like we decide what we want to put online. But like, imagine like you post a picture of your kid like in their diaper online, and now my man's like 30 years old trying to get a job, and it's like, oh, here's a picture of you in your diaper. Like, who would want that, right? So I'm like, it's not fair to your kids, and let alone now people try to get more attention, by posting their kids online. That's why, by the way, I don't post my kids online. I have no pictures of my. If I put actually a couple times.
I think you see the back of your head,
or I like blur the face.
Yeah.
When it's time, they can decide what they want to do online, but I just don't want to push them into this public space without.
And the thing of it is, I think it's when I do post my kids, I'll be transparent with you. We do it because with parents, we like it.
Yeah.
That's why we do it.
Exactly.
It's not for the kids. Like I'm not kidding myself.
It's not for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like on like Mother's Day, everybody posts pictures with their moms. Like your mom's not seeing this, man.
Yeah.
It's just for you. It's like, oh, so nice. Oh, you love your mom. Like, okay.
Right. I don't do that though.
Look, no judgment. I know that sounds super judgy.
For Mother's Day. But like for my, So my daughters, but now they're like, oh, are you going to post on Instagram the selfie we just took?
Yeah.
You know, they're like, you know. So
but look, so there's also a difference, right? So people who have like closed accounts, like family accounts, okay, fine.
Sure.
But if like your account's public, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Because that's like on the internet for everyone to see.
And I think for me, it's different. It's like, well, my oldest, when my daughter was born, I was super excited about the first kid.
Yeah.
And then I don't post as much about the second and third. Because my mom's like, my daughter's like, my youngest is Khadija, she's 4. Yeah, she's 5. Sorry, I have a 6-year-old. I got
lost track.
Skip one. Yeah, lost track. They're told. So 5-year-old's Khadija. Mom was like, "You don't post any pictures of Khadija.
Yeah,
you just post all pictures of Hadia.
Yeah,
like Hadia was first. She was like that was like a new thing, being a parent.
Yep.
Now it's like kid number 2, like welcome to the club.
Yep.
You know, but I'm already a dad.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. So, all right, Shaykh Saad. Well, appreciate you coming on.
It's good to be here, man. This was fun.
And I'm glad we got to talk about some Jordans and you had Italian beef. For listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. If you want to support the channel, you can do so financially by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Sultans and Sneakers. If you can't do that, at least like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a review on the audio podcast platform of your choice. For my special guest, Shaykh Saad Tasleem, I'm your host, Mahinda Podcaster, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.